talking about tritone substitutes in this video, and I hope you like this because we had a lot of requests for this. And people, well, I want to try to explain what they are and how to use them and how to make them, apply them to your songs so that your songs sound a lot more interesting. So now here we go with tritone substitutes. I want to say, in order to understand the tritone substitute, first thing you have to understand is what is the tritone. And I talked about this in a previous video called Amazing Music Concepts, in which I talked about the theory of this. So you really should watch that first because it's like a primer about what I'm going to talk about in this video. In this video, I'm going to put those theories into practical application within tunes. And that's what you really want to arrive at. You want to have the theory, you want to understand something in depth, and then you want to put it into practical application. That's how I like to do things. So now, the tritone, tri meaning three, we can find it in a couple of ways. One way is to just take a note, any note on this, anywhere on the keyboard. We'll take C, middle C, and we'll go up 3 whole steps. So 1, C, D, E. Now we have to go up to F sharp, right? Because there's no, okay. So we go up to F sharp. So now that interval is a tritone. Now that is an interval of a augmented fourth. How do we know that? Well, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Half step higher would be augmenting the fourth. Now, if we went up to 5 and we went down, that would be flatting the 5. So we can look at this as a sharp 4 or a flat 5. So that's the interval. Now, the other fascinating thing about this, which I showed in the previous video, which I just talked about, is that you can start on octaves like that and then move inward like this, one note at a time, and you're going to end up on the tritone or the augmented fifth. So it's in the middle of the scale. It's in the middle of the chromatic scale. Now that's a fascinating relationship to whatever the tonic is. But now, here's what I'm going to say about this. This interval is very unstable. And the reason for that is because it exists within a dominant 7th chord. So let's look at a simple one like G7, which would resolve. Now, we're going to be talking about dominant to tonic, which is a dichotomy. In other words, like tonic and dominant are two things which can't exist without each other. If we just had all dominants, then we'd be living in limbo. But because we have dominant and tonic, we have man and woman, we have day and night, we have everything in the universe that is opposite of each other and needs each other and works together with each other. So, you know, so G7, did I get philosophical there? Okay, G7 to C. Now, you know, if you create a melody, simple, anything. So we have, there you have tonic to dominant, dominant to tonic. So within all music, from the simplest to the most complex, you're always going to have the dominant to the tonic or the 5 to the 1. Okay, but the interesting thing about the 5, particularly in jazz, not always in classical, is that the dominant 7th, the dominant chord, because we're talking about sevenths, has the 3rd and the flat 7 in it. And that is a tritone. Now, how do I know that is a tritone? G7, G dominant 7th is a tritone that wants to move to C. How do I know that that is a tritone? Well, you can see that there's the 3 whole steps, right? And it's right in the middle of the scale, right? There you go. So it proves itself. Now, what we want to do is resolve it to its 1. Like that. Now I'm going to show you more in depth about this concept and how to apply it to your jazz tunes and really use it in a sophisticated way. Okay, this may not work out, but this is my book. Looking at it here now, I'm showing you in my book how to find tritone substitutes and how to use them in tunes. I'm giving you examples. And here's the cycle of fifths. Now, within this, you can see that the tritone substitute, as I showed you, we went from the octave down to the middle, So whatever the chord is here, the tritone substitute will be the opposite point. So you can see this is the C7 in the cycle of fifths, and there's the F sharp there. Here's the D7 in the cycle of fifths. Here's the A flat there. It works perfectly. Here's the E7. There's the B flat 7 there. In other words, when you go to the opposite point in the cycle of fifths, you will see the tritone working perfectly. I want to point out an extremely interesting thing about the tritone substitute, and that is, here's the G7 now, root, third, fifth, flat 7. Its tritone substitute will be up a flat 5, or an augmented fourth, will be a D flat 7. So now let's look at the notes. Root, third, fifth, seventh. So let's take the third and the seventh and put them up here. Put the third up here. Now that's the third, and this is the seventh of the D flat 7 chord. So they're exchanging those two notes, the third and the seventh, but they're reversing them. In other words, the third of the G chord now becomes the seventh of the D flat tritone substitute. The seventh of the G chord becomes the third of the D flat chord, or its tritone substitutes. They're exchanging those two notes. Now, in addition, if I play this as a flat 9, now all the notes are in there. In other words, let's play that a G7 flat 9. We have root, third, fifth, flat 7, flat 9. Now let's go to the D flat 7, flat 9. So we have those same notes in there. See that the fifth of the G becomes the flat 9 of the D flat. The seventh of the G becomes the third, and then the flat 9 becomes the fifth, and then the third becomes the seventh, and then the fifth becomes the flat 9. Did I lose you on that? Anyway, you can experiment with this on your own when you check it out. But that's what's happening. They're exchanging all those partials. All those notes that are in the chord are being exchanged, but in different order. And so that's the fascinating thing there, and that's why they work as substitutes for each other, because they have a lot of the same notes. Now, often you will have to adjust the voicing of the tritone substitute if the melody note is going to be in conflict. Like, for instance, say I have this G7 here, I'm going to play the D flat. Well, now, that doesn't sound so good, but say you had a G in the melody and you wanted to go to the D flat and play the tritone substitute. You have to keep that note intact there, so it becomes now a sharp 11. So that's an important thing to understand about the tritone substitute, that the voicing of it has to fit, has to work. Another thing is you can play a 2-5-1. I could make this a D minor 7, G7 to a C, and still use tritone substitutes on the two chords approaching the C. In other words, the D minor 7, I can use the tritone substitute of the A flat, the 7 there, you know. As long as the melody note works. Say it's this note, and I want to use the tritone substitute, and use it there, going to the G7 there, or going even to the D flat. So now using two tritone substitutes, the one for the 2 chord and the one for the 5 there. I'm using an A flat 13, now to a D flat 9, to a C. Now that means you can use the tritone substitute for minor chords. You can use them if you're playing in minor keys as well. And it doesn't always have to be a 2 chord, it could be a 3 chord. You can use the tritone substitute for a 3 chord to approach its 6, like maybe something like this. Now here's tritone substitutes. See, that's, because if you did cycle of fifths, it would be this. Now using the tritone. So they create this chromaticism. That's what happens with the tritone substitute. It creates a chromatic move. And so now you can mix it up between cyclical moves and chromatic moves, and have your music move in a variety of ways that's much more interesting. We'll continue. So now, coming from my book, I'm going to use the song All the Things You Are to show you the tritone substitute. And I hope you will follow me on this now. Let's see. We're in the key of A flat. So we go F minor 7 to B flat minor, and the next chord is E flat 7, resolving to A flat. Now if I use the tritone substitute in there, I go up remember the 3 whole steps to A7. So I'll use this chord. Now what was the 3rd of the E flat 7 now becomes the 7th of the tritone substitute. So now you have another chord you can use in the tune. You can either replace it with the original chord or add it to the original chord, so you get another dimension of harmony. So that's what makes it so interesting. Now notice that the tritone substitute chord tends to approach the resolution chord from the half step above. So it goes 5, flat 2 to 1 there. Now here's another tritone substitute. Originally it was G7, now the tritone substitute is there. Now you know you can use the tritone substitute to replace the chord, or you can add it to the chord, so that you have 2 chords there, the original chord and the tritone, like this. Now here we continue. Now here's the tritone substitute, the E7. Resolving to E major 7 there. The original chord was, there was no tritone in there. Now we have this. Now the original chord here would have been D7. Now I'm going to use the tritone substitute. There's that half step approach to the G. The D7. Now here's the tritone substitute. Here's the tritone substitute. Okay, so now you get the idea of this. Now let's listen to what it sounds like in context. So it gives you another dimension to your harmonic analysis, or how you're approaching the tune and what you can do with it. You can do so many more things, and I'm going to show you this. I'm going to elaborate on this on the next section. Let's take Blue Moon. Now I'm going to show you the chromatic approaches that allow you to enable you to make this more interesting by using the tritone substitute. Right there. Now there I have a tritone substitute, and there's another one. See now, like, see how much that enriches if I just did this. That's just a straight harmony. Now I'm going to do tritones. Those are all tritone substitutes. Now, let's look at them in detail. Approach to the C7, half step above. Approach to the F minor, half step above. 3/6 chord, approach to the C7, half step above. Now here's a tritone substitute. Now that would normally be G minor 7. But we're using the tritone substitute. And this would normally be F minor 7. I'm using B, the tritone substitute. Now there alone I've used probably 7 or 8 tritone substitutes, and it sounds much hipper than if I was playing the traditional 2-5-1, 2-5-1, 1-3-6, you know, like the traditional chord changes are now enhanced. And now you want to be able to use these in your left hand in different styles. I'll show you another style. We're going to play Don't Blame Me now using just traditional chords, and then I'll use tritone substitutes. See the difference. Here we use the tritone substitutes. Here we go. See, those half-step approaches have a lot to do with it. And it does really give you a lot more to deal with and a lot more interesting things that you can do in constructing your harmonic progression underneath the songs that you're playing by using the tritone substitute. Let's review that and conclude. So I wanted you to understand the theory of the tritone substitute, and I wanted you to understand the application of it, and I wanted you to try to play it in songs that you're working on, and whatever they may be. And I'll maybe do another video on this and give you another simple example, but that's the thing. In other words, see, these are all tritones. In other words, they really enrich the harmonic structure of your chord progression by having these substitute or additional chords come into the picture. And now one of the things, and one of the most important things, is whenever you use a tritone substitute, if you're using it to relate to the melodic line, then you have to be sure that you alter the chord, such as like this. Like that. Say I want to use it there now. I'm going to use the tritone substitute of the D flat there. Now I want to be sure that that melody note works with the D flat altered chord. So now I need to make it a sharp 9. So that's one of the most important things that you do, is whenever you use the tritone substitute, you want it to relate to that melodic line. So you might have to alter that dominant 7th to a flat 9, to a sharp 9, to a flat 13, whatever it may be, what is in the melody line. That's an important fact. Okay, thanks so much for joining me this evening at the Jazz Ranch. I hope you like this lesson, and I will continue to do more on this subject, and hope to see you soon. And until then, I will say, in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, and I'm not there yet, don't worry about that snake, swing loose. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.